At the end of the last video, I mentioned that we would explore a little bit of life casting for the next part of our life-size bust, particularly thinking about the ears. And there's a couple reasons that I want to do that. Number one, I want this video to not be just purely repetitive of the previous video, the miniature bust in polymer clay, where we sculpted the ear from scratch. I mean, all those steps, all those suggestions, those techniques, and the order, the sequencing of doing things, that they're no different in monster clay. The material has its own qualities and limitations and opportunities, but the process, the sculpting process, isn't any different. So sculpting an ear from scratch in monster clay would be no different than doing it in polymer clay. So I'd prefer to do something different. The other thing that's going to allow us to do is going to allow us to push our life-size bust from something that's based in reality, maybe towards something that's a little more imaginary, something that's, I don't know, a little more alien or a little more creature-based. Thought we would maybe treat it as a piece of concept art rather than just a purely academic exercise of sculpting a likeness. And so there are lots of great videos and resources for life casting, so I'm not going to do an extensive demo. I will link to what I think are some of the best videos on the Smooth On sites. I'll be using Smooth On materials, mold making materials, and it really is, they have everything there. There's no reason for me to repeat it. So I'll make sure to link to those to those videos. So let's just talk about casting quickly. I know we touched on it a little while ago. So a couple terms. So when we're casting something, we're going to talk about the positive. So the positive is the thing that we're going to mold. What is the thing that we want to make a mold of? Okay, so we have this little face. And then this is a silicone mold. So what we do is that ends up taking the negative impression of the positive. Okay, this is a flexible mold, so it needs something called a mother mold. So got this chunk of plaster. Okay, so we've got the positive, we've got the mold and the mother mold, and then this chunk of monster clay that we poured into the mold and popped out, then this becomes the cast, or it becomes another positive. Okay, so positive and negative, those are some terms we'll use: mold and mother mold. When we use the term life casting, all of those same terms apply. The only difference is our positive is usually a human, so it's a cast of a face or a hand or the head or the entire body. And again, I'll post some links to some life casting. The other thing to note about life casting is you have to be extra careful with your materials, because you are putting mold making materials on skin. And so you only use life casting materials because they are tested to be skin safe. Okay, just a quick note on life casting and the use of life casting. So this is a this is a mold, a life casting mold made from something called Body Double, which is a silicone based skin safe mold. The mother mold is made out of plaster bandage. There's some thought, some old school purists thinking that life casting is cheating. I don't believe that for a second. We thought that about photography at first, we being some segments of the art community. We thought that about digital sculpting. Really, if it's a tool that's going to get the job done, then it's completely valid. And if you're working as a concept artist, sometimes speed is your friend. Speed and efficiency. So if you're sculpting a human head, right, like a clay sculpt, if that's what the project calls for, and you need to get something up and running quickly, and you have a life cast of an ear sitting around, why wouldn't you use that? So what we'll do is we'll cast and then we'll modify it. But again, to me, there's no cheating. If it's a tool that's going to work for you, then use it. The only thing that's cheating is using someone else's work and calling it your own. This is the 21st century. We have to use whatever tools are available to us. So all my tough talk about doing some life casting, blah blah blah, because let's be concept artists, blah blah blah, everyone wants to be a concept artist. Then I realized I am not set up in this studio for life casting. Typically I like to have a team of 2 or 3 people working on a cast, because you are working with a human. It's too difficult to do on myself. My wife is always a willing participant, but she has a lot of hair and she has some piercings in her ear, and that's and with just me being here, that's not enough. That's not a big enough crew. So we're going to use Swamp Monster here as the as our model. Okay, so we're going to pretend this is a human. It's going to allow me to work on my own, and I don't have to work as quickly and as carefully as I do with a living person. So I'm going to use AlgaSafe, made by Smooth On, and I'm a big Smooth On guy. You can buy cheaper products, but I've never had a problem working with this, particularly for life casting. And so this is called AlgaSafe. Alginate is essentially it's the same basic material that your dentist would use to make a dental mold, if you've ever had a dental mold made. Alginate is what we would deem a one-time casting material, because it starts to break down as it dries. Now, depending on the mold, you can probably cast a couple, but you can't leave it. It doesn't have any shelf life, or library life, as we sometimes call it with molds. So the other great thing about Smooth On is everything, most of their products are 1-to-1 by volume. So you don't need to weigh things. And typically what you do is you have your water. I like to use room temperature. I've pre-measured it, so it's 1-to-1. If you use room temperature, you're not going to get caught. And very carefully at first. It does shoot up a little bit of dust at first, but the other nice thing about this AlgaSafe is it doesn't have any free silica in it, which is can be the dangerous component of other alginates. You want to mix it up until it's nice and creamy. Talk about pot life with casting. That's how long can you stir it in the pot, kind of how much working time do you have before it starts to set up, and then cure time. So you've got about 5 minutes of pot life and about 8 minutes cure time using room temperature. If your water is too hot, it'll set up really quickly. If it's too cold, you'll have longer working time, but it'll take longer to set up. So I like to use room temperature. Okay, so that's about the consistency that we would want the alginate. Okay, and I could pour that on my hand and take a mold of this. You don't need any prep. I sometimes do like just to put a little bit of just get it just a little bit wet to start with. So then this is something I poured several minutes ago. I'll just show you what the material is like. This is nice. It's a wax paper cup, so it comes off really easy. And there is my positive, just one of those blank kind of eyeball forms that we were using earlier. Is that a little better for the lighting? No, it's all terrible. Okay, so that was our positive, and now you can see. Can you see? That we have the negative, including all the detail of that little ridge of the iris. There's some tiny little air bubbles in there. Nothing that would concern me. Then I would take Monster Clay or whatever material and just pour it directly inside, let it cool, and pop it out. Again, the nature of this mold, I could probably get away with casting a few before it starts to deteriorate. And just because I've got this material here and I'd hate to waste it, we'll just do a little texture. My wrinkly old hand. So you can see this is how we would do it with an ear. You just have somebody kind of shaping it to keep it from running all over the countryside. Running all over the countryside. I am really turning into an old man. Okay, so I'll let that set up and peel that off, and we'll see what that looks like, and then I'll go ahead and probably film a time lapse of mixing up and pouring the alginate for the first ear mold, and then I'll just repeat it, and then once we have both ears cast, like one of each side, then that'll be probably it for this video, and then we'll do the next video talking about what can we do with it. So it's not cured, but we've reached the end of the pot life, you can see, and kind of the working time, because I can't move it around like I did before. So again, it's not cured yet, but the pot life is we've exhausted the pot life. So it's been just about 10 minutes, and I can see the alginate starting to dry out on the edges where it's turning white. Plus I can see it starting to lift, so it does tear quite easily, particularly in an application like this where the edges are really thin. You can see how easy it comes off. You can see how easy it tears. And flex my fingers a little bit, and that helps as well. You can see it's picked up all of the detail. Oh, including my ring. That's a no-no. You have to take your ring off when you life cast, because sometimes the material can get underneath it and you'll get kind of trapped in there, and it'll tear the mold taking it out. So if you've got a crew of multiple people, you can apply the alginate directly onto the model. You can have one person apply it, and then one person kind of, keep scooping it up and mashing it into shape. Because I'm flying solo here today, what I've done is I've just kind of hacked together this fairly sketchy, but should be kind of effective. I built a dam out of a yogurt container. I used some gray Monster Clay just to kind of secure it to the head. So what I'll do is I will lay the cast down on its side carefully and mix up the alginate and then pour it in and gently agitate it around so it's getting in all these crevices, and we'll let it set inside this mold. Again, I typically wouldn't do this with a human. If you had a couple people, the alginate is you can control it enough if you've got a couple sets of hands, but for today's demo, we'll do it this way. So if this was a real live human that I cared about, I would still have a pillow, have them, if I was just doing one ear, I would probably have them lay down like this. The one thing to keep in mind is the effect that gravity can have on life casting. So the weight of the material would, on a human ear, because that cartilage is so soft, would pull that ear down a little bit. So it might be better to have them standing up, and again use the 2 or 3 person approach where one person mixes up the material and then you've got a couple people applying it and smoothing it out and making sure it doesn't run everywhere. As we saw, it only takes a couple minutes of babysitting the alginate before it sets up enough that it stays where you put it. But for this purpose, we'll lay it down on its side so I can pour it directly in, and I'll take a brush and agitate the alginate to make sure it gets in all these little grooves. I'll be careful not to mash the positive, but I want it in behind the ear as well. The only other thing I would do is, if this was a real live person, is I would take a foam earplug, like for hearing protection. I would cut it off so it's a little bit short and have the model put it in. You don't want to put that in on their behalf, just so the actual ear canal is plugged, so we don't have alginate going right into their brain. That takes a little bit more cleanup when you're done. I'm not sure why I'm so obsessed with this, with smoothing these areas out. We can do that later. Okay, so I'd put an earplug in. I would allow the model to put their own earplug in on both sides, then mix it up and apply it. Well, let's have a look and see what we've got here with one of these casts. Let's sacrifice that container. Now, I'm not sure if you could pick up on the time-lapse video, but one of the ears on the positive got a little bit thrashed. I'm gonna try to be careful. A 9-year-old monster clay cast is not as strong as an actual human ear. Oh, that one's pretty good. No, got an air bubble in there. I'm not sure if you can see that. But that's okay. I can easily deal with that. Overall, that's pretty good, I think. Just a quick diversion to point out how asymmetrical our ears can be. These are casts from my own head of my right and left ear, and the size and shape as you look more and more is quite different from one side to the next. Fascinating.